in Tafel Aleph, Halacha Gimel. Kli sheyesh bo tlai, a kli that has a patch on it. In Kodem HaTlai, with Leis Isser, if the tlai was put on before the Isser was put on, then Ein Tzarech Lahasir it. Then, if you want to kasher the kli, you don't have to take off the tlai before you kasher it. The Kabbalah Kach Polte, just like the Blia went in through the tlai, so too the Blia will come out through the tlai. When you kasher the kli, the Blia will come out through the tlai also. In Kodem Blia, what happens if it was treif or chametz before you put the tlai onto it? Then Tzarech Lahasir HaTlai Kodem Hag'alah. So then you have two choices. Either you have to take the tlai off and kasher the kli without it, or Yosin Gachal Makom HaTlai Ad Shi Tzarech Guf Isra in Yeshna. Or your other choice is you put coals onto it and you do a libun. We'll hear exactly what in a second. You do a libun to burn away all the Isra that's under there. And then you kasher the whole kli, including the patch on it also. The mushal eitz, if it's made out of wood, so you're not going to be able to put coals onto it. That's not going to work. Then you have no choices. Okay, I'm going to leave this end part of it for next time. This has to do with a little bit of the end of the last time to be clear. Okay, so the Mechaber says that you have a tlai, then there's you have to kasher it, but you have a problem because the tlai is covering up something. So the Mishnah Berurah brings that there's two ways that one understand what pshat in this is. One pshat is that the problem here is that there might be the end stuck underneath this patch. When the guy put it on, he might have left some food underneath it. Hag'alah only works for blias, doesn't work for the end. So you could do Hag'alah all day long, but you left the end underneath it. Okay, which is if you read the Mechaber, the end of the Mechaber sounds like that he says, Ad Shisar Gufa Isser. Okay, he's talking about as if there's a Gufa Isser there. He says, until you burn up the Gufa Isser, it sounds as if he's talking about the end that's underneath it. Others learn that it's not because there's the end, but it's because there are blias underneath it, and those blias can't come out. The blias will put in directly. Now there's something blocking them. How are you going to get the blias out? The way some say it's like two kelim touching each other. The Hag'alah water is banging against the outside of the kli, the tlai. It's not getting to the inside. Okay, not getting to the second layer, and therefore it can't get the blias out. Okay, now even that, before I explain that, has Yukin, because it says he talks about Kabbalah Kach Polte. At the beginning of the Mechaber talks about Kabbalah Kach Polte, which is talking about a blia. The blia went in through the tlai, come out through the tlai like that. So there's both mashmois in the Mechaber. Now the Mishnah Berurah points out that when he say that the chashash that the Hag'alah of the patch won't get through to the inside, to the deep part of the kli, I said it because it's like two kelim touching each other, which of course can't be for real what it means. Because if we look at it like two kelim touching each other, then there's no blias. Then who cares? I'm not worried about blias coming out of the kli. Okay? So what it means is, the Mishnah Berurah says is, some blias do come out of the kli. Some blias will come out, and Hag'alah will get out some of the blias. Maybe because it goes through around the edges. You know, the patch maybe rolls through the patch, but around the patch. How big is this thing? Just like we had last week about our handle, that the blia can spread. The blias can come out of the inside of the kli, but Hag'alah won't get all the blias out. It'll get out some blias, potentially, and cooking will get out some blias, but you won't get out all the blias because there's this patch covering it, and therefore you can't get the blias out.
So you can work, so something you say you can work on that. In other words, or maybe it's included we know before. In other words, if you try to catch a mix as a kli,
in effect, that's what's going on.
You're not catching that spot.
Spot underneath the patch, you're not catching. Right. But what the Mishnah is pointing out is that you can't say that it's as if it's two kelim touching each other and no blias will come out. None will come out. If you say no blias come out, then what are you worried about? Use the kli. Who cares? No blias will come out when you use the kli. When you cook the food and you eat it, obviously some blias are coming out, and Hag'alah will then also take out some blias.
That's the Kashrus. So don't know whatever blias are going to come out by the first cooking will come out.
So that I was going to mention that. Okay, which is that the Rishonim ask that question. They say is not about this. They say is, if you use a kli once, it's a place you cook kli, and then I cook noodles and part of a food meal. So what I'm going to say, well, the blias came out. So first they say, what's the answer?
I'm not going to see. I'm only coming out.
Right. So maybe the first time didn't. Second time, if you don't, full Hag'alah, maybe it didn't come out. So if you do anything less than what you're supposed to do,
that's not even damage in this case. So you're trying this because it can't get through.
Okay. Now, see,
What's the din if you kasher mitzvah sakli, and then you go and use only that mitzvah sakli that you kasher?
It's not good.
It's not good, but you're afraid that the ma'at will come out from the...
That's correct, because we're trying to say this. It says, maybe in your cooking in this pot, for what you did, brought no blias. Maybe brought half the blias. And there are other ones that didn't come out the first time, they'll go out the second time. They didn't come the first 3 times, they come out the 5th time. Because you never know. There's one way they get at all the blias. If you don't do that and you get at all the blias, you don't know if you got anything out, if you got a little out, you don't know what's going on. It could come out tomorrow or the day. You don't know what's going to come out. So unless you do the full Hag'alah, you can never be sure you got it out.
In some whole discussion of the Kashering Yusufi's base, there was some sheet that says that if you talk about oisei miktas that you kasher, then it's okay.
That has to do with the Rama, whether you think the blias came out. It has to do with the other side. Do you think the blias spread to the other parts, or do blias draw out of the parts?
Blias draw out, right? Like somebody says blias will not draw out.
Some people say that, like, but over here, so the Mishnah, however we're going to say it, the Mishnah says there's got to be blias come out of that spot. The blias don't come out of those things. Let's say we'll say because it gets very hot in the back there. I don't know what it is. Somehow the blias are coming out, because if the blias aren't coming out,
I'm asking you that.
How he came to that conclusion.
No, I'm saying if it's place or something, I don't know, if sheet or something, it could be even cost like that. If you have to milk into the thing, if you put it in places, then you talk about the mitzvah that it was kashrus. Or not. You have to be mishayek the whole thing on that. So it's something that you don't need mishayek anymore.
So that has to do with what we talked about this week, about whether you say cham mitzvah cham kuloi, which is what the Magen Avraham says. He says so there should be no blias. Who cares? Or the blias go in but they don't come out. Whatever you want to say in cham mitzvah cham kuloi. So and then what he says it's not true. If it does get hot, then blias will come out. So the dinner of when it doesn't, the dinner of when blias don't come out is when it doesn't get hot. It's when you talk. That's what they say.
Over here it might get hot. Here it's
in the middle of the pot. You cook the pot, so the whole thing you got. If you think about the patch, it's got, how much is it covering? A small spot, so it's going to get hot. It's part of the cooking. Now, but I mentioned it because this is not really what's going on over here, but it's worth mentioning just for the chiddush of it. This Rishonim's kasha that why don't we say the blias came out the first time you cooked it? Then? So the answer, no, maybe it didn't go out the first time, we got the second or third time. So Lori Belsky has a chiddush like this. He says it.
So 100 times, then it's okay.
Not 100 times, right? He said, let's say he cooked in a pot. We look at a little company, and we come there, and for 5 years they've been using kosher ingredients. Okay? We can see that for 5 years. But no one ever kasher became, and who knows what happened more than 5 years ago. So he says, after a bunch of years, you say, it's kasher. Why? He says, why? He says, because we could believe that the blias don't come out the first time. Maybe they come out the second time, or the third time, or the fourth time, or the fifth. He says, but how many times can you use the kli and say the blias? Right, the blias are waiting.
Just at times,
yes. How many times can you say that the blias are waiting for the rabbi to show up? Waiting just until we showed up. Then
5 years ago, we tried to look records. You forgot the kasher. Okay, we got kasher now.
Right. That's right. Right. So that's what he says, and it's not far-fetched. Although he won't give you an official get it to it. There's no, official limit. Is it actually 4 years? Is it 5 years? But when it sounds good enough, then he lets it. So that this thing is not really the opposite of that, because a person in his home, how many times do you use a pot? I have a pot and I have this patch on it. So maybe since this one, I used it 1 time or 5 times, so it's before Pesach. So I used the hummus 3 times ago, 5 times ago. It's not exactly the case over there. In the case over there, in a company, they use the pot every single day, again and again and again. They use it for 5 years. How many thousands of times can you use it?
Because a company gets a used piece of equipment, you can trace back what the last company did, maybe.
Right, but before that,
I don't know. I'm going to go back to the history of the kids. That company, where they got it from?
Well, if they got it from a kosher company, you hope that they took care of it. Where it is.
No, but let's say they get it from a company that does something. You can look at the company.
They get raw milk. And then they want it. The company's please let them use it for raw milk. But before that, could use it for whey or something like that.
Okay. So I'm just mentioning, it's not really an opposite thing, but I was going to mention it. Okay. Now, the Mishpur says there's enough kamina. Maybe since there's enough kamina between the 2 reasons. Okay. A simple enough kamina between the 2 reasons, whether it's because there's the N underneath it, whether there's, for the blias, is what happens if before you put the patch on, you cleaned it. Which I don't even understand what the question is. You think that any normal person would do that? He says, well, if you cleaned it before you put the patch on. Well, if you cleaned it before you put the patch on, then there's no problem with then. And then those fats could be blias. It can't be then. You knew it was clean. I don't understand what you could be. I left a banana underneath it when he put the patch. I don't understand what the shot is.
Rhyme the residue.
A little bit. Okay. So he's talking about because that's again the same. So probably we're talking about there's a little bit left under it. Okay. That brings us to the next thing, which is when the Machaber says if you want to kasher it, you could put coals onto it and do libun to this. Put coals onto it. Okay? What is the point of putting the coals onto it? What are you trying to do? It's some kind of a libun. So the Mishnah says, again, two reasons, depending on why you hold you have to kasher underneath the patch in the first place. If you think it's for the end, so then what you're doing is you're doing libun. He says, if you look at Hag'alah, you'll see that you could do Libun Kal to burn away the end. If there's little bits of the end on the kli, and you do Libun Kal, it burns away the end. Okay, not big pieces. If you leave a whole potato on there, it's not going to burn up with Libun Kal. But there's little bits of the end left out there. You can clean up little bits of the end by doing Libun Kal.
In the front, over here it's behind the pit.
So right, exactly. So
what's the question? Why is it a little summer here?
No. So the Mishnah says, according to that, you do Libun Kal. The coals are just Libun Kal. The coals are just Libun Kal. He says, but some hold in Shulchan, some hold you have to leave Muhammad for that to end. He doesn't explain why. And the reason it's going to be is because it's being blocked by the patch. Even though we say Libun Kal works to get rid of the end, that's a differentiation in Hag'alah that it works. Libun Kal works with that. So L'chari doesn't say, but L'chari the reason it's going to be is because behind the patch it's not going to work. Libun Kal, okay? It doesn't burn up the end through the thing. There's other reason, but the Mishnah likes that reason. He thinks that if it's for the end, you can do Libun Kal. What about if it's for blias? If it's for blias, then he says you would need Libun Kal. Okay, if it's for blias, you need Libun Kal. Now, before I ask you a question, and then he finishes off, since the Iker is like the first day, that's because of the end, and since most people within the sheet of the end hold that Libun Kal gets rid of the end, so he says, if the blias ain't a ben yoimai, you could do Libun Kal. If it's ain't a ben yoimai before Pesach, you could get rid of whatever's behind the tie by doing Libun Kal. You don't have to do Libun Kal. Which is to say, we're passing Me'ikra din, the main sheet is that it's the end, and within that, most people hold that the reason Libun Kal would get rid of it also. So we're sort of being samach on these two things together to say, if at least if it's ain't a ben yoimai, you could be samach and you could do Libun Kal. That's the Mishnah Brenzo. So why do you need Libun Kal if there's blias? Not for them. If the problem is because of blias, why do you need Libun Kal? So that's because we're saying because you're not using a direct fire. Okay? And it brings us to a completely different child, which I had really meant to talk about Hag'alah, but I forgot to. So I'm going to tell you about it now. Two sides about Libun Kal. But sort of negate to this. What's the shear to do Libun Kal for blias? I'm not talking about for them. Libun Kal for blias. How hot does the thing have to get? So there's a misconception. The Mordechai says like this. People say the shear is Kashrus. That's not the truth. The Mordechai, who's the makar for the din of Libun Kal to take the place of Hag'alah, it's based on the Gemara, but the Mordechai is the one who really talks about it. It says like this. If you put the fire onto the kli until the point that it's so hot that it will be yad to let us on the other side, then, as Rabbi Shechter explained it, if it's yad to let us on the other side, it means the fire penetrated the whole thickness of the kli. You could tell that by the fact that it's yad to let us on the other side. Then that takes the place of Hag'alah. That's what the Mordechai says. He says, now, how are you going to know if it's yad to let us on the other side? It's not editorial. I mean, you don't stick your hand onto there, you're going to burn yourself. How are you going to know if it's yad to let us on the other side? So he says, if you stick a piece of kash onto there and the kash will burn, then you can be sure that it's yad to let us on. Okay, so that means is
going to burn.
Right. So kash nisraf is being machmir on this. Instead of sticking your fingers onto there and burning yourself every time you're trying to kash your kli, instead here's a test to figure out whether it's yad to let us or not. But that's not the shear. The shear is yad to let us, and the kash nisraf is a test for it. Okay, that is to say, when we say the shear for yad to let us, the shear for Libun Kal is kash nisraf, that's not the shear. The shear for Libun Kal is Hag'alah is really yad to let us on the other side. You test it with kash nisraf. La fuke, I'm putting this as the other side. La fuke, the Hag'alah Ismaimini, who holds that Libun Kal is really Libun. By him, Libun Kal is Libun. The shear is kash nisraf. It's not that the test is kash nisraf. The shear for Libun Kal to be Libun is kash nisraf. That's the shear that makes Libun Kal.
And this man is the one who's making those holds that Libun Kal is always good.
Right, they hold Libun Kal is Libun. When he says Libun Kal is Libun, he means that is really kash nisraf. Then he says the shear is until the kash nisraf. That's the shear.
But
when we do Libun Kal Hag'alah, when you do it for Hag'alah, the shear is yatzvus from the other side. He might be moider.
So the Mordechai is the Hag'alah.
Yeah, it has nothing to do. They're really two different things. They're both called Libun Kal, but they're really two different things. And both of them have a at least in the Shulchan Aruch, have a practical shear of Kashrus. Instead of putting your hand in the shear is in Lamaisa, you test it by Kashrus, but that's not really the shear. Really, the shear is got to go this way. I say it first of all because people are confused, but also a lot of people say, well, everybody holds the shear is Kashrus, but the Shulchan Aruch says it's got to go this way, as if he's choluk on everybody else, and they say we go like Shulchan Aruch. But it's not true. He doesn't argue. Nobody disagrees with what it says in the Mordechai. The Mordechai says the shear is got to go this way.
And Mordechai is talking about Hag'alah?
He's talking about Hag'alah. He's going to take when Libun Kal takes the place of Hag'alah. He says instead of Hag'alah you could do.
So there's the right machlokes in the place my and the
No. Hold on.
He's talking about what the shear really is. He thinks real Libun is what we call Libun Kal.
Oh, he holds that's Libun Kal.
He holds that's Libun. Libun Kal. He holds that's real Libun. When the Gemara says it's a guzma. It's too much. You can't do it. The shear. So he says the shear is Kashrus. That's the real shear. But this is a different thing.
Maimonides is not saying that this is Libun Kal. I'm sorry. The Mordechai is not saying this.
No, he's talking about Hag'alah. It takes place Hag'alah. So Yatzvah this. By then that shows that the heat went if the heat went all the way through, Yatzvah shows that it went all the way through. So exactly the way he tested, if you do Kashrus, that's how he says it. That's the test. The Shulchan Aruch is not arguing with everybody else. He's just saying what the Mordechai really said. It's just that's a din. There's no argument. That's all I know. That's it. That's what it is. So now, I asked you a question. You want to do Libun Kal to your oven, okay? Which many hold you could do Libun Kal. In a few halachos we'll get to that. That you could do Libun Kal to Kashering oven. Okay. How do you Kashering oven? How do you do Libun Kal to your oven? So how do you do Libun Kal to anything? So you you'll ask Rabbi Yelsky, and he'll tell you do 550 for an hour, or 475 I think for an hour and a half, or 375 for 2 hours. I forgot the numbers that he has. So where did he come up with that shear? So he says the shear is because they took pieces of paper, stuck it into an oven, and they saw. He said this is done by people 30, 40 years ago. 30, 40 years ago. Put the paper into the oven, and they saw that after an hour at 550, it started to burn or turn brown, and at 375 for 2 hours. Each one of those things, it was like a test. They put a piece of paper into it. So and therefore they said that. You see that this temperature for that long does the trick. Very nice. Very nice. That's the shear. You'll be Kashrus if that's shear. But that's not the shear. The shear is Yatzvah display. So why don't we see when it be Yatzvah display? You know when it's going to be Yatzvah display? Really quickly, because the oven walls are paper thin, like 1/10 of an inch thick, the walls, and there's insulation on the other side. So as soon as your oven gets up to 200 degrees, as soon as your oven is left there for 5 minutes at 200 degrees, you know that the whole thickness of the wall is Yatzvah display. Right? It doesn't take that long for a tiny thin piece of metal, which has insulation on the other side, in a burning hot oven to get hot. So you have a thermostat. When the thermostat says it's 200 degrees, I don't know, 150 degrees, 200 degrees, let it sit there for a couple of minutes, it'll be Yatzvah display. What are you going for Kashrus? Who cares about Kashrus? Kashrus is not the shear. Kashrus is the test for the shear. We have a fancy way to test it. We have a thermostat. We can't put our finger on the other side. You can't get your finger to the outside of the inside of the oven. What are you looking for shear Kashrus? So he said, Rabdowski said, no. He said, the only time you could use the shear of Kashrus is the only time you can use the shear of Yatzvah display, and Libun Kal is talking about when you put a piece of coal or a fire right onto the kli. When you put things right onto the kli, then you could say that the fire penetrates and does this Hag'alah. He says, but in an oven, you're not putting the fire right onto the kli. You have just a warm chamber. In a warm chamber, you can't say that just being in a warm chamber till Yatzvah from the inside is enough to make it kasher. No, there's no makar to kasher like that. The only Libun Kal that works as Hag'alah is when you put the fire onto it, you put the coals onto it, then it has direct contact, it does its thing. Mm-hmm. But if you do it just by putting it into a warm chambers don't do the trick, don't make kashering at that temperature. And therefore they decided that it should be a kashrus. Okay, so it turns out that Libun Kal, the way he's saying the 550 is sort of like a made up thing. It's not the shear that the Mordechai says. It's like a new thing of Kashrus by being in a warm chamber. Okay, now a little bit this din sounds like what he's saying, because listen what's going on here. We have a piece of clay and we have a tly in front of it, and the fire, the coals are right on the tly. How much do you have to heat it up to get the blias out of the back, the second layer? So the Mishnah Berurah says, if you want to get the blias out, you have to do Libun Kal. We said, why do Libun Kal? He said, because there's something in between it. Okay, so what? So there's something in between it. The thing is burning hot. Who cares? Pretend that there'd be a space there, or there'd be nothing. What's the difference of something in the way there? The fire is affecting that the real kli, which is behind the patch. So we should say that what it does to that patch, we should get the bleeds out. So it sounds like a Ravidelsky, which is, since it's not in direct contact, just being hot is not enough. To be hot doesn't do the trick. You have to be direct contact, and then you could use this Gatzela this way. But if you're just hot, that's not good enough. Am I making sense? Over here in the Klai, what's going on is the Klai, why can't Libun, why is Mishra say Libun Kal will not do the trick to get bleeds out? Why not? Why shouldn't Libun Kal get bleeds out? So the reason is, I'm saying, according to Rabelski, you'll say, well, because there's a Klai in between them. It doesn't let you get the bleeds out.
Well, Rabelski says because the Libun Kal temperature is good enough.
Well, he says not. That's not the point. Kashrus. So you're saying maybe
it's not Libun Kal though.
You're right. So maybe that's like a question. Here the Mishnah says you have to Libun Kal. Okay, it's a question. The truth is, there's a much more serious question.
Good.
Okay, the question is that there's a much more serious question, which is, Rabelski saying that there is no makar to saying by warming up a chamber you could do Libun Kal. Okay? In fact, there is an exact case of this din is Mamash's case. Now, we'll see that I'm not sure what it says in that din, but it's a very din. So it's not in Taf Nun Aleph, it's Taf Samach Aleph, which is the din of a baking matzah. It tells you how do you kash your oven before you bake matzah. So even though Hilchos Hag'alah came with Taf Nun Aleph, Taf Nun Beis, Taf Samach Aleph has a little bit of that kashering your oven. And it says how do you kash your oven. There's different ways to do it, and one of the ways is you fill up the whole floor of the oven with coals. And that kashes your oven. First, I'm going to run. Wait a second. You filled up the whole floor, so you did Libun Kal to the floor. What happened to the walls? What happened to the roof? They have like a chamber, so you did the whole floor.
What do you do to the walls and the roof?
They have bleeds.
So how are they going to come out?
That's a good question. I have no idea I was wondering that. We're talking about matzahs, the dry matzahs. How you going to bleeds coming out? I don't know. This is kind of
silly question.
When you cook dry things in a thing, they don't bring matzah. There's no zayah from matzahs. So I guess, but really,
you can't travel even through the walls.
Can't.
Please, we can't travel through the walls in dry conditions.
Okay, that's a good question. Maybe that's what he means.
I think we put that matzah directly on the thing.
On the wall. Maybe. Okay, I'm not sure. That's a good answer. I thought a different answer maybe that on Pesach we're machmir for reicha even without zayah. Maybe that's what the chashash. I don't know what it says.
Usually.
You bake
out of the walls. Out of the walls.
No, because you're right, because the matzahs will give reicha into the walls, but not to get the please out. You're right. I'm sorry, that's wrong. You're right. I'm saying the matzahs will give reicha out if there be chametz and matzah in the same thing.
No.
You're right, correct. Maybe it's because I'm not sure. So the Magen says, how are you going to get the please out? I'm not here for the question. Listen to the answer. See, he says this. He says, you're right, the coals don't do it. But when you heat up the oven to bake the matzahs in it, when you heat it up, you're going to put fire into the oven to heat up the matzahs. So then the walls will get a kashrus. The walls will get kashrus when you heat up the oven. You're not putting fire onto the walls. What's he talking about? So he's obviously talking about a Libun Kal to those walls, which is fine. That's all they need. They only had a bliach there. So, or reicha. You Libun Kal. What's going to go on over here? You're going to come here one morning and you're going to decide you want to make matzahs. Okay, you're going to light up the oven and let it sit there for a couple of minutes until it gets nice and hot, and then you can throw in your matzahs. And that's the kashrus. So, what's going on here? What did you do? How hot? Did you put a fire onto the walls? No. Did you do Hag'alah? No. Did you Libun Kal? No. What did you do? You just heated it up. So, you do Libun Kal. You do Libun Kal without putting a fire onto the chamber. You do Libun Kal exactly like I do in my oven. You turn the fire on, you put it into a warm chamber. It's in a warm chamber, and what happens? The walls get hot, and that's considered Libun Kal. So what happened? Now, everybody says, I don't know what this means. They will say, it's Kabbalah Kachpoltes. So it's like the bleeds run in through this hot oven, they come out like that. I don't know what that means. But no one says it's got to sit there for an hour at that temperature. Where we saying that it's 550 for an hour? So without, I don't know exactly what the shear is, and I don't know how hot it got. But you see that whatever temperature it has to get, when it hits that temperature, it's hot enough. And I suspect that their walls were much thicker than ours were. It's a clay oven or a brick oven, a clay oven, and the walls got hot. So after a couple of minutes, by the time it takes time to warm up an oven to start it up. By the time it gets hot, what would I say? The shear is like, that's all it's bringing on the side. The heat really penetrates the walls, and then you ate the kashrus. So that case over there is talking that you're warming up a warm chamber, exactly what we do, and it's, I'm guessing, Libun Kal. I don't know what else to call that thing. It's Libun Kal. And what does it say? It doesn't say you have to leave it there for a certain amount of time. It says when you kasher the floors, you have to make sure you get coals in every single spot. And if you just warm it up, it's not good enough. There's all kinds of rules about the floor. But the walls, there's no rules. It's the point that the Magen Avraham has to figure it out by himself. What the walls? Oh, when you hit the oven, that'll happen. It's like such an automatic kashering. So there's no shear. There's no it has to sit there for this amount of time. So maybe it's 550. I haven't a clue how hot it is. I don't know. But my point is that whatever hot you think it's going to get, when it hits that temperature, it's a kashering. And if you would ask me what is it going to handle, it's going to take. How do you heat up an oven? When you want a baker's oven, he heats it up till it's really nice and thick, or everything's really hot, and then he puts food in. That means is until the heat penetrates the entire walls, it's really nice and hot and thick, hot and ready to cook, then I put the food in. The oven, it's not like us, we just stick the food in. You get it preheated really well. But that's what the Mordechai says. When the heat goes all the way through the dirt kli, the way Rabbi Shachar explained it, till it's it's really penetrates the walls, that's considered Libun Kal. So sure sounds to me, from the din over there, that the Libun Kal doesn't take time. Now, I'm going to say to you, the people say there that it looks like Kabbalah Kachot, the same amount of heat. So it may very well be that you can't do Yad Halevis, but somehow, whatever that means, that it has to be Kabbalah Kachot, I don't know what that means. Whatever that means, we can say that in our oven you have to turn to 550. Maybe you have to turn to the highest heat. I don't know. I don't understand how Kabbalah Kachot has to do with temperature here. Whatever it is. But even so, my point here is, when it gets to that temperature, you see from Tasman Mahal that it just has to get to that temperature and then you're ready to go. So why by us also the same thing? When my thermostat, my oven beeps when it hits its preset temperature, turn to 550, wait till it beeps that it's hit that temperature and we're finished. It's penetrated, or 2 minutes later, it's penetrated the walls. The walls are paper thin in our walls. So it's a question. Meaning, what Ravasky is saying is there's no McCarthy's din, and therefore we made up this pretend Kashrus rough. And this is a very exact case of that. Okay? At the same time, his kula, to say 375 2 hours, is also questionable, because there the people talk about it, whatever it means, that you do Kabbalah Kachot, just like when you bathe, this temperature does the trick, so therefore also. So I guess most people don't bake it 550. But if you boil something in the oven, it does at a very high temperature, so he's letting you get away with less than that. That's a question.
Do you remember what the number precisely was for 550 or 500?
It was 550 for an hour.
For an hour?
For an hour.
That was a half hour for half hour.
So he says, I'm telling you, so when you say to him, people who are saying 550 for half an hour are basically saying is, wait till it gets to 550. Put it on to 550, let it sit till it's really nice and baked in. It's like really hot all the way through. Mm-hmm. That's what half an hour is. His hour is not that. His hour is, because they tested it and found out that if you leave the paper in there, if the 550 for an hour, it starts to show signs of burning in this man. Maybe it was after 45 minutes. They decided on that.
Well, you put the paper in the beginning, and that's what happened?
You put the paper in. This is what he said. He said for 30 years. So, of course, obviously, probably didn't take an hour. It probably took 45 minutes. And probably took 25 minutes and 48 minutes. And like that's what they said, an hour, just like I said about time. I said they took an amount of time until they said, well, at that point, the cash started being this rough. So the paper started being this rough. So that shows that it mimics putting the fire onto it. I'm just saying is that there is a very specific din that's exactly this way Kashrus, and it doesn't get this year. The other numbers I don't remember offhand. I think it's 450 for an hour and a half, or 475 for an hour and a half, and 375 for 2 hours. I haven't written down. We can look it up. Mm-hmm. But I'm just saying is that his whole claim is because there's no makar to it, and I'm saying there is. Maybe we could see from Tasman Mahal that you can't just do Yad Sled this way. In a warm team, you don't just do Yad Sled. Even that, I'm not convinced it doesn't say that. But, okay, so I was really going to do another thing about Libun Kal. Maybe we'll save that for next week when we finish it, then and do the welding and stuff like that.